Hey everyone, so today I'm going to be talking about beauty and higher existence and the idea that beauty is rooted in objective qualities of health and vitality and of strength and power. There is a lot of subversion in terms of beauty today. We live in a postmodernist age where everyone believes that they themselves can determine the definitions of their own moral relativism, that they can determine their subjective definition of beauty, which is just not the case. Beauty is something rooted in objective qualities. It is something real. It is something that reflects nature. And I've been talking a lot about this topic recently, and for good reason, because I think the definition of beauty and believing that beauty is rooted in something objective, that it is rooted in an idea of nature, is fundamental to orienting yourself with a true, real philosophy that is rooted in reality, that lives in accordance with nature. Now, when it comes to beauty, and we think about beauty as something objective, I want to take it back, like I said, to this idea of health and vitality. Beauty is something directly tied to strength and power, and more specifically tied to survival. And not just survival, but life and higher existence. I want to take us back to evolution. Everything starting off as one singular living organism and branching out to plants, branching out to animals, and from animals branching out to insects, reptiles, mammals, and so on and so forth. If everything were purely about survival, then why wouldn't animals just be a cockroach, for example? And this is why I believe in what I call a will to eternity, that the inborn will of living things isn't just survival, but actually a will to eternity. The reason we promulgate and that we reproduce is a sort of idea of immortality of our species. Though we ourselves will only live for a certain amount of time, as humans, maybe 70, 80 years, our children will live on. They will die eventually, but they will have children. We want to believe that somewhere, eventually, we can secure the eternity of our species, that somewhere down the line, humanity can transcend, that they can reach a point of singularity in which the future of humanity is guaranteed, at a point where we can stop something like entropy, that we could stop heat death, that we can ensure our survival, that we have like one unified body of nations, that we can conquer the world, so to speak. It's always been the idea that one must conquer the world. That is the ultimate achievement for someone to do. And people can do this in multiple ways. You can do it through outright conquest, like the Alexanders and the Genghis Khans and the Napoleons tried to do, or you could do it through ideas, the way a Jesus Christ figure or a Muhammad might try to do with religion. And the reason I'm bringing these up is because these are all wills to power. And the will to power, I believe, is a will to eternity, a will to ensuring an unending empire, an unending polity, a never-ending, organization, civilization, society, culture, race, whatever. And this is tied to beauty. Beauty is a reflection of this will to power. It is a reflection of something real and tangible. And this is sort of a Nietzschean idea that roots back to nature, that rejects a lot of the sort of strange definitions for objective morality that you get throughout history. When you think about deontology and the sort of Kantian categorical imperative, it believes that the act itself is either good and bad rather than the consequences of the act. And nature is all about consequences. Rules, doctrines, metaphysical doctrines of religion are interpretations of nature, essentially, finding out what allows us to interact with each other. So, for example, thou shalt not kill. In the Ten Commandments, we shall not kill each other, and that doesn't mean killing outright is rejected, because as we know, there are many great Hebrew kings in the Old Testament that had to go to war, whether it be with the Philistines or with other enemies of Jerusalem, and they killed their enemies. So thou shalt not kill is more aptly characterized as thou shalt not murder, that people within a polity should not kill or murder each other, because if you kill each other, you won't be able to trust each other, and therefore the cohesiveness of your society or civilization will lead to ruin. It will lead you to be weaker as a society and lower and ruin your will to power. And beauty is ultimately, aesthetic beauty is all rooted in this will to power. It is rooted in health, vitality, and strength, which is all the promulgation and the will to eternity of a people, essentially, a collective group. It is never truly about the individual, no matter how you view it. Life is not about the individual. It is always about the future of your species, the future of your civilization, your culture, your race. There is a hierarchy of identities from yourself to your family to your community, to your people, to humans as a whole, to life as a whole, and then just to everything. There's this crescendo of hierarchies, and over time, as that expands, how much you care about certain things expands too. So ultimately, it's not just about yourself. What takes precedence is the survival of your species, and then the survival of whatever identity you subscribe to, whether that is a polity, whether that is a race, a culture, or a religion. And religion has been a very powerful one recently. When we think about aesthetic beauty, you think about the Greeks, for example, and how the Greeks saw the perfect body in their sculptures. It's not this bodybuilder figure, and it's not a fat figure, and it's not a really skinny figure. It's sort of this lean, muscled warrior. It is the warrior archetype. See, the sort of big bodybuilder archetype, which I understand, it's cool. Like, we should strive to meet physical strength, especially in the modern age, but originally that wouldn't be best for the warrior. The warrior needs to be fast, agile, needs to have endurance. If a warrior has too big muscles, he will get tired in battle. So you see in MMA, for example, or boxing, you don't see these huge, juicy, muscular people. You saw it a little bit during the PED era when steroids were allowed, and this is because that sort of circumvents a lot of the sort of negative repercussions of just focusing on bodybuilding. But for the most part, MMA fighters aren't these super ripped, jacked, bulky figures. They are lean and muscled, like a Greek statue is. And that is how the Greeks viewed beauty, as lean and strong, because beauty reflects health. And they believed this was the healthiest way to be. The warrior who is lean, who is strong, this is how he should look. He should be lean and muscled, able to move quickly and powerfully. And you see this in what we see as beautiful in nature. We see the sun is beautiful because it is a reflection of health and vitality. The sun literally gives us life. Without the sun, nothing we have is possible. Therefore, we see the sun as beautiful. We see brightness as beautiful. You need brightness for the crops to grow for you to eat, or you need brightness for the grass to grow for the animals that you hunt to eat, whether that's a gazelle or a deer. So we see grass fields as beautiful. We see brightness as beautiful. We see dark clouds sometimes as beautiful from a subjective lens, but really, when it's rooted in objectivity, we are afraid of darkness. We are afraid of the dark clouds because the dark clouds mean no sun. And of course, occasionally you need the dark clouds, you need rain. Just nonstop sun is also scary. So if you're in a desert culture, right, and you just see the sun nonstop and there's no crops growing because there's no rain at all, that is bad. So rain also is beautiful because we need rain to grow the crops. But ultimately, darkness, for example, there is a sort of beauty to it, no doubt. However, there is a fear of darkness because in the dark we cannot see potential predators or potential enemies, so it is a hindrance to survival. So again, this idea of beauty and power and strength and survival comes into play. When we think about the lion, why is the lion beautiful? Well, we attach this idea of health to skin and to mane, to hair. We find beautiful hair to be beautiful, to be aesthetically beautiful, because it is a reflection of health. If you have healthy hair, it's a reflection that your bodily functions are working well. If you have healthy hair, it means you probably don't have disease that can cause hair loss or a disease that ages you quicker. It's a reflection of health. So the mane of a lion is beautiful because we attach health to this idea of healthy fur, healthy mane. And not just that, but the power of the lion. The lion is supreme in his habitat. Of course, humans have now overtaken animals because of tools, technology, and just our social behavior. However, the lion reigns supreme in his ecosystem. In the savannah, the lion reigns supreme. One male lion can fight off 20 hyenas. The lion is courageous because the male lion's survival depends on his strength, because if he is not strong enough, another, younger, stronger lion will come and take his pride from him. And once a male lion gets older, they become more attuned physically for combat, for taking down big prey. They become a little bit slower and a little bit more muscular. So if they don't have a pride, it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for them to survive without the more agile lionesses to hunt for them. So everything's rooted in an objective quality. Beauty is rooted in an objective quality. That is a will to power, a will to strength, a will to health and vitality. And when we think about higher existence, it is going beyond mere survival. See, the mole who lives in the ground has no natural enemies if he's deep hidden in the ground. Moles actually live a very long time, surprisingly, and I'm talking about naked moles, the ones that hide in the dirt and whatnot. But they're not beautiful. And why aren't they beautiful? Why is the mole not beautiful? It survives. If life and beauty are just a will to survival, then we might find the mole beautiful or the cockroach beautiful. But that's not merely what life is about. There is this idea of higher existence, and this idea of higher existence is rooted in this idea of will to eternity I talk about. Being able to ensure your survival, being able to ensure the promulgation of your species, of your race, of your culture, what have you. And this goes back to the idea of power. What is power? Well, power is control over the environment around you. It's not just survival, but being able to control the survival of most things around you. If you think about why humans are so powerful, we literally have the nature at our fingertips. If we treat nature badly, we can end entire ecosystems like you see today. We can literally tear down whole forests and burn them down. We have so much power at our disposal. And power is control of your environment, control to do what you like with it. And a will to eternity is ensuring your survival into the future. Certain animals, no matter what happens, can't survive. If there's a fire, animal has to run away from the fire. There's no way that they can put that fire out, while humans actively can. So this will to eternity is a will to controlling more than just simple survival. It's more than running away from a predator. It's confronting the predator. It's taking land from that predator. It's mastering space. If you have two human groups, it is not enough to just move away and survive. You want to claim territory, you want to claim hunting grounds, or you want to claim agricultural fields to increase your power, to increase your ability to not just survive, but survive, not just surviving easily, but surviving greatly in a sense. Living greatly is the better way to say it. So when we think about art and a culture's ability to create art, you need a certain amount of idleness to create art. If your mind is purely based on survival, you will never have the time necessary to pursue art, to be able to find different manifestations of beauty, different manifestations of power, so to speak. I believe it's from Carroll Quigley. He talks about this, that a civilization to thrive needs a certain amount of idle, free time to be able to pursue things like the arts, to pursue things like history. If you look at the Greeks were able to pursue philosophy because they did not labor as much as other people did, because they had a sizable slave class. The Spartans had the Helots, and the Helots outnumbered the Spartans greatly. So the Spartans, using the Helot labor, were able to focus purely on warfare. So every Spartan citizen, and specifically a Spartan citizen, because you also have freemen, which were neither slaves nor Spartans, who sort of fulfilled artisanal roles, businessmen, merchants, so on and so forth. But the Spartan citizen himself was purely devoted to warfare. If you look at the feudal system, the knight is able to pursue warfare, on only warfare, because the laborers, the peasant class, toil in the field, build things. You have your merchant class as well, so that the warrior class can pursue higher life, higher existence, pursue more greatly the will to power by increasing their faculties of exerting their will and exerting their power, exerting their will over others. This is true in Japanese feudal society as well. The samurai could pursue poetry, could pursue warfare, because you had a serf peasant class, and you also had a merchant class, which is actually at the bottom of the Japanese hierarchy, because they did not actually create anything. The peasants and the artisans created things. The peasants grew crops from the ground, but the merchants just sold things. So they're actually at the bottom of the hierarchy, which I find quite interesting, especially given my own critiques of the merchant class, which currently rules most of the developed world. So this idea and will to beauty and this will to higher culture is a will to power. And like I've said before, there is a will to something beyond mere survival. The life of the peasant, which is purely centered around just survival, just growing crops, just creating the goods you need in a society, is considered to be below that of the knight or the warrior or the samurai, who dedicates their life to furthering will to power, because they're spending their days reading, writing, learning poetry, learning the histories. The aristocrat is the early scientist, is the early innovator, and the warrior. Essentially, the early idea of the warrior, especially in Greek society, Roman society, in Japanese society even, it's equal parts scholar and warrior. It's this way of life. It's not merely a profession the way that soldiery is today. And higher existence to them is pursuing unveiling the mysteries of the world, learning more about themselves, learning more about philosophy, about the nature of existence. And therefore, the will to power is equal parts intellectual pursuit, equal parts martial pursuits. It's the harmony of pen and sword, sort of like what Musashi talks about, or what Mishima talks about is the mind and body in Sun and Steel. It's the balance of intellectualism and action. And you need a philosophy of action, ultimately. Ideas on their own without physical manifestations are meaningless. What is philosophy without the power to institute that philosophy? You can have all the ideas you want, but ultimately they mean nothing if you can't actually create those ideas in real life through force, through exerting your will on others. And this is true of religion too. Of course, people will talk about the subversive nature, for example, of early Christianity, which was able to attain power with what Nietzsche calls a slave morality, by appealing to the pity of the Romans. So the Romans converted because they pitied the Christian, because the Christian convinced them of their own morality, which is quite interesting. And one common mischaracterization of Nietzsche is, though he does favor master morality completely over slave morality, is he does recognize the ingenuity of the slave. And that's something to pay attention to in our society today. The cult of victimhood, the sort of progressive left, also have a slave morality. They try to elicit pity from the powerful, from the developed world, from the people that have money, that have strength, that have power. The small, weak sort of people of the world want to elicit pity from the strong, right? So there's different wills to power. But ultimately, ideas, for the most part, cannot be spread without force. And this is still true of Christianity. Christianity really took hold in the world once there was force to back it up. The Islamic caliphates almost conquered Europe, but Charles Martel, in the Battle of Tours, smited the Islamic invaders, and he won a great victory for Christendom. If you look at the Crusaders and the conquistadors, they fought for their faith. The Pope commanded them to wage holy war, and the Christians fought with immense courage, and they defeated many enemies to spread the religion of Christianity, so that Christianity would have primacy over the pagan religions in Europe and eventually in the Americas. And of course, before that, the pagan religions had primacy. The Hellenic religions had primacy because the Romans were the strongest. Before that, Alexander was the strongest. So the Hellenic faith and the Hellenic culture took primacy. Ideas needed a physical manifestation, power, to be able to spread them. So beauty, because beauty comes from culture, it comes from the statues you get from culture, the art, the paintings are nothing without power. Beauty is directly related to power. Beauty, and what we find beautiful, if taken purely and in its raw form, is a reflection of power. What is beautiful is also powerful because we find it beautiful because it is powerful. And it's quite interesting. And this is true of any idea, any culture, any faith, eventually. Like, you can have a slave morality, will to power at first, but eventually you have to have real power, whether that's merchant class convincing the working class to fight for them, which is subversion, but they still need the force of the working class. And that's why there's so much disagreement and so much discord in society today, is because in the past, the warriors led society. Therefore, they also had the most responsibility. The warriors were the kings and the rulers and the nobility, but they also died in battle. They sacrificed for the polity. Where today, if you look at the Vietnam War, for example, the song Fortunate Son, the politicians aren't fighting the war. The kids of the politicians aren't fighting the war. It's the working class. But who has the power? It's not the soldiers. It's not the working class. It's not the military. It's the merchant class. So ultimately, no matter what, a culture, a people, a race, a religion needs force, whether they're leeching off of other people's force or they have their own force. In Islam, the Islamic faith started off as a ragtag group of followers of Muhammad, but Muhammad created such fervor and religious fanaticism and created such brave warriors. You can say what you want about Islam, and I have many critiques of it myself, loads of critiques really, but they are brave. The Islamic warrior is brave. He is one of the bravest, and this is what has carried Islam, is that they are willing to go on jihad and go into battle no matter what. You have suicide bombers literally killing themselves for their faith. Without force, Islam would have never been able to spread. Any idea, religion, faith, culture needs force. So what people will find beautiful, because people find beauty in religion. That's one of the reasons why religion exists. You have these beautiful cathedrals, you have the beautiful music, you have mass, beautiful ritual, and in the pagan faiths before, you had temples to the gods, beauty. Religion was emanating with beauty. The best religions emanate beauty, and no religion truly that does not emanate beauty ultimately lasts. It sort of stays in the undergrowth, like Jehovah's Witness, which rejects all sorts of celebrations. It's a very fringe religion because ultimately people want to experience beauty in one respect or another. So you need beauty in religion, and you need power to institute things like religion or culture or what have you, right? So this goes through everything. This idea of power and beauty exists everywhere. What we find beautiful is what increases our power. That's the root of it. What we find beautiful will make us more powerful. It won't just help us survive, but it will make us more powerful in the long run, which is why we live for beauty. We live for will to power, which isn't just pure survival. It's not just pure nihilistic acquisition of power. It is something more. And I want to bring this idea back a little bit, because I'm talking about all these things, and I want to tie this into why it's important, why beauty and higher existence are important, why we should think about these things. Because if you look at life today and the subversion of beauty today, it is a subversion of power. The people in power today don't have any actual power. If you talk about like The Prince by Machiavelli, he says you should not invade a foreign land with either a foreign force that you are borrowing or a mercenary force. And why does he say that? Because ultimately you have no real power. If you invade a country with a mercenary force, the leader of those mercenaries has the actual power. Why can't that mercenary leader just take that power from you after you've taken it? If you think about using a foreign force, let's say you use a foreign ally. Let's say I'm a small country like Switzerland, and I use the French as my allies to invade Austria, for example, right? Just a wild example. Ultimately, France has the real power. How can I say, oh, we conquered Austria with France's army, but me, Switzerland, is going to keep Austria? No. Ultimately, France could just say, all right, Austria is mine, right? And what's happening today is that the people with power don't have any actual power. It's not the militaries, it's not the warriors of society that hold power in most places in the world. And this is the nature of liberal democracy, depoliticizing the military, because they're afraid of actual power. The merchant knows they have no real power, so they have to depend on the subversion of power. They have to convince everybody else, we must follow the institutions, we must follow the law. But really what that is an abstraction of value. Money is an abstraction of value. There is no force behind money. There is no sword behind money. 10,000 warriors, right, is more powerful than money. Money can be used to buy them, but ultimately the power rests in the soldiers and the warriors, not the actual money. The money is an abstraction of value. Money is supposed to represent a barter system, so to speak. It represents value that you can get other goods with. And back in the day, you would just trade goods for that, but now you have money. So people that, like merchants, who don't actually create anything, but learn how to subvert money, stockbrokers, whatever, they don't really have any power. This is why crypto bros and a lot of the drop shippers, they don't contribute anything to society. All they're doing is manipulating abstractions of value. And so it's a subversion of will to power. And life today is often the subversion of will to power. Politicians have no real power. It's just like in The Prince, Machiavelli. They're relying, so to speak, on a mercenary or foreign force. In reality, that's the working class. The working class make up most of the military, but the working class doesn't have any power, any real power in society. It belongs to the political, merchant, wealthy class. The economic elite have the real power in societies without actually having tangible power, because they're not leading the military. They're not actually fighting these wars. They're getting other people to fight in these wars for them. So it's a subversion of will to power and a subversion of beauty. And you see this today in progressive culture. This idea of fat is beautiful, or that, beauty is completely subjective. It allows people who are not beautiful, who don't have any objective qualities of beauty, therefore no objective qualities of power, of strength, to claim that power, to claim that beauty without actually possessing it. So a fat person says, no, I'm beautiful. You have to respect me for being beautiful, when they're not beautiful. They're subverting this will to beauty, this will to power for their own benefit, through pity, slave morality, through eliciting pity from people who are actually beautiful with actual power. Say, no, give me this power. You should feel bad for me, feel sorry for me. And this is why Nietzsche hates pity, right? This is the ressentiment of the weak. The weak look at the strong and feel jealous, feel envious of the powerful people. They say, oh, they have all this strength and power, all this money, and all this grandeur, and I can't have it myself. How am I going to get that power myself? You know, the merchants and the slaves, they see the warrior elite and they think, how can I have that power? And they think, and they have resentment, and that is the envy, right? And they figure out a slave's will to power, elicit pity from them. Oh, you're morally wrong for being powerful. You're morally wrong for being strong. Blessed are the weak, right? And they elicit pity. And that's not to say we shouldn't have compassion. We should absolutely have compassion for people. But when that compassion is used against us and they take our kindness for weakness, that is when the slave, that is when the merchant rises up and takes power from the warrior. And this is what has happened throughout history, especially in the past 300-400 years. And this is what is happening today. The weak people of society are convincing the strong people of society to sacrifice and give their power to them. So you have these people who are ugly and fat and not attractive, trying to subvert this idea of beauty so that they can have that power. So for example, a fat person might want to have an attractive partner. So they convince society, no, I'm actually beautiful. So you, the attractive person, have to date me no matter what, right? So it's a subversion of will to power, and or subversion of beauty, and by extension, a subversion of will to power. So this idea of beauty and higher existence again comes into play. So then what is our role? What should we do? How should we revive and recapture this will to beauty, this will to power? And I say, let's go back to nature. And I'm not saying be complete trad, go back to the past. I believe in a future vision for society, for civilization, for all of us, a future society. But it's like Nietzsche says in Human All Too Human. He says something along the lines of, metaphysics are the building blocks of which we build the future. So you have to take what worked in the past, which reflected nature correctly. You take the warrior ideal, the heroic ideal, the Homeric ideal from ancient Greece, and you bring that into the future. You bring that into a new age with new applications. I think Ernst Jünger's The Worker is one very good piece of futurist literature. Same with On Pain. We have to adapt for the future. We can't be stuck in the past, but we should also recognize what was true in the past and what was right and what lived in accordance with nature. So when I say return, it's not returning to the past, it's returning to living in accordance with nature. I've talked about it again and again in my videos with evolutionary psychology, is we live in an age where we don't live in accordance with nature. Technology is growing faster than our evolutionary psychology. So we're not equipped to deal with hyperstimuli like pornography or drugs or even food. Processed food is not realistic. You would never have this much food at your disposal. So we have to practice moderation when it comes to these things. And we have to go back to the idea of beauty. It's not pleasure that's wrong. And Nietzsche says this too, I believe, in Twilight of the Idols. It's pure material pleasure. You must spiritualize pleasure. It's like sex, for example. Porn is just materialistic sex. It's just pure materialism. There's nothing more to it. It's just purely getting off. Whereas sex can be this very beautiful thing. It could be an emotional connection with a person. When you have sex with somebody, you're sharing a piece of yourself and they're sharing that with you. And it can be very special. And this is why sex was held as sacred in Greek societies. Now, of course, they had their debauchery too, and they had their vices, but it was meant to be something spiritual. When you have sex with something, it's meant to be something more than just an exchange of material pleasure and hedonism. And so it's not pleasure that's wrong, it's pleasure purely for the sake of pleasure. It's like Musashi says, do not pursue the taste of good food. That's not saying don't eat good food, but don't just eat the good food to eat the good food. Eat to experience new flavors, to give yourself a new perspective of life. You know, you eat food to, for example, experience a local culture. These are all beautiful things. Use it to enhance your life. Don't use it just to get yourself stuck in this hole of pleasure and this samsara of constant desire, wanting more, etc., etc. Use it to pursue something that will give you a greater perspective of what life is about, to affirm life and to be attached to life, like attaching yourself to nature. When you experience pleasure, it should bring you closer to nature. It should bring you closer to feeling like your ancestors did, bring you closer to feeling like Julius Caesar after defeating the Gauls, after bringing back the Gaulish king and walking through the streets of Rome with his face painted red during a triumph, raising his arms to the Roman crowds. That is the feeling that we should seek, the feeling of victory over life, the feeling of will to power, of will to eternity. It is winning in nature. That is what we should pursue, not just this pleasure. This pleasure is meant to happen after we've achieved things. But now in the modern age, we receive pleasure without actually doing the work for it. So it again is a subversion of beauty. Porn is a subversion of beauty because it's not really beautiful. Sure, these women might be beautiful to look at, but they're not acting beautifully. They're just having mindless sex over and over again. And porn is something that plagues so many people today. But it's not sex that is the problem. It is the pure materialism of it, of this act, and it is a subversion of beauty, a subversion of will to power, and a lower existence. So when I say higher existence, seek living in accordance with nature, seek physical fitness. Physical fitness brings us closer to nature because we had to be physically fit to survive. We had to be fast, agile, and strong to catch prey, to be strong enough to kill it, and to be strong enough to fight against other humans. So then, over time, the bodybuilder physique gets more important in certain circumstances. When you're holding a phalanx or a Roman formation, you have to be stronger to hold a heavy shield and to thrust your spear or your sword forward, right? So things do change. Nature changes, but it should change in a way that still holds the core principles of nature. So you should seek physical beauty, because physical beauty means health, and you should be healthy because in nature you are expected to be healthy. Higher existence is also the pursuit of the mind. If we really want to secure the future of humanity, we have to evolve. We have to grow in our minds as well as our bodies. We have to get smarter and wiser so that we can create a new era of human existence, so that we can become this new stage. It's like Nietzsche says in Thus Spoke Zarathustra, man is to the Übermensch what ape is to man, right? Like we have to evolve to something more, and that takes wisdom, and that takes scholarly pursuits. It's not purely about the body, but of the mind, and that is that will to eternity, will to power. If it's just about survival, you just focus on the physicality. But of course, not only does wisdom come into play with survival, but it comes into play with increasing survivability in the future, and increasing not just survivability, but power, which is something beyond survival, right? It's not just survival, it's ensuring the promulgation of the species for as long as possible. That has always been the will of man, is sort of a will to godhood, a will to be one with the gods. And this is true of theosis in Christianity as well, becoming one with God. It's becoming one with the eternity. It's securing eternity for our species. So if we reach that point of technological singularity, and energy is never fully expended, atoms are never destroyed. So who's to say that there isn't a footprint of human souls, so to speak, that we can access at that point of technological singularity, where we sort of become one with God, where we sort of ascend to this higher spiritual metaphysical realm. There's so much to think about, and maybe I sound schizo for saying it, but that is the will to higher existence. It's a will to eternity. It's a will to life that does not end, and it is adapting to the times, it's adapting to the future, and it's being as powerful as possible, but powerfully beautiful and beautifully powerful. It's like these nihilistic acquisitions of power where it's just pure like subversion, like the merchant, for example. It's a dark sort of power. It's not a power of light, it's a power of darkness. And that is sort of the good and evil. Good and evil has been subverted, right, over time. But I do think there is something of good and evil. And I think good is beauty and power, and evil is ugliness and weakness. When you are powerful, when you are truly powerful, and powerful of your own accord, and not borrowing it from others, and not being cruel to attain it, but doing it in a sort of beautiful expression. Like you take Achilles. Achilles was compassionate. He thought of, when Priam asked for Hector's body back, he thought of his own father, right? And he felt compassion to Priam, and he returned Hector's body after he slayed him in the Iliad. The true powerful person seeks the toughest competition because that shows him how powerful he is. You don't prove your power by defeating who is weaker than you. If you're playing pickup basketball, you don't challenge a 10-year-old. You challenge someone your own age who is as good as you or better. And that's how you prove how good you are. And that's the thing with cruelty. Cruelty is hurting someone who's weaker than you, that can't fight back. There's no honor in cruelty. And that's why this nihilistic, dark view of power is not the true will to power. And that's how I sort of define good and evil, right? So there is something to think about. So what I want you to get out of this is that beauty is objective, higher existence is objective, and higher existence and beauty are tied together. They're tied to power, strength, vitality, and eternity. Think will to power, will to eternity, and beauty above all. We must be defenders of beauty, and we must fight against the great ugliness of this time, and we do so by mastering space, by coming together in brotherhood, and by recognizing the true instincts, the true good instincts. Instincts can get subverted over time. Porn is an instinct that has been subverted. So instead of conquering new lands so that you can have, beautiful women or whatnot, or that you can provide for your family with great treasures you capture from foreign lands, it turns into porn, right? Like you have all these people that you can watch online, and that's a bad thing. That's a subversion of instinct. So find the true origins of instinct and what's positive about those instincts, and learn to bring that into the modern age and into the future. This is what we want to do. We want to build off of the past, build off of traditionalism, as Nietzsche says, build off of metaphysical doctrines of the past and bring it into the future. We must be futurist. We must seek forward. We must seek Promethean ambitions to master the stars, to create galactic empires and colonize Mars. We have to seek something more, and we have to act on our Faustian spirit when we see the vast ocean or the vast space, vast galaxies. It is in our nature to master that space. It is in our nature to adventure there, to be like the conquistadors who had no clue what the hell they were getting into when they went to Mexico, modern day Mexico, is to fight the Aztecs or to fight the Incas, right? Or you think of Columbus going to the New World. Think about how scared his men must have been, but how brave he had to be and how brave he had to show them that he was, because they had to act on their Faustian ambitions, to see what is behind the curtain, to seek the mysterious lands beyond, to seek something more, this will to the infinite, this will to eternity, the Faustian spirit, right? So seek more, seek higher culture, seek more than just survival, seek beauty, seek power, seek strength, seek brotherhood, and seek the creation of a new Rome. As you'll find out what that means soon. I have a new project coming out soon called New Rome, and I will elaborate on that in the future. But seek the revival of the heroic ideal, seek the revival of will to power, true beautiful will to power, and will to the infinite, and that's something more. And I'll leave you with that today. Aesthetic beauty is rooted in reality, rooted in objective qualities, and we must pursue those objective qualities and live in accordance with nature. So, as always, this is The Warrior Philosopher, building foundations of the warrior philosophy. We'll see you next time.